good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're coming from. And happy Cinco de Mayo. As many of us know, Cinco de Mayo has been adapted as a day of color, celebration, and vibrant festivity. So it's our humble attempt to incorporate that into our session today and make that the theme as we cover various elements with you. So just to get started, we'll level set on modernization and the different approaches to modernize. Step 2 will then take you through something new that we are launching to help you refactor your apps into microservices as part of modernization, and that leverages artificial intelligence. Step 3, I think many of you might already be aware of the capability of IBM Cloud Transformation Advisor, and we'll take you through the enhancements we have made to it in the last several months and how it can be even more useful to you. And then the last but not the least step, we'll take you through some of the tie-in that we have with our developer tooling and capabilities, with whether you have the WebSphere Migration Toolkit and the Codewind, and how all that ties making the developer experience more productive for you. So just moving along real quick, we have a very knowledgeable team of presenters here. First off, actually, I would like to thank my research colleagues for joining us. Maya is a distinguished research staff member, and Jin and Anoop are members of her team. Then Dana and Deb, they are both architects in our organization and Cloud Pak for applications. And John and myself are offering managers, and many of you probably relate to them as product owners or product managers. So we'll take you through the table of contents that I mentioned earlier. And I'll just get started with a little bit of level setting. I think as many of you attend sessions on Think this week, I think one of the key message that you will hear IBM talk about is that to date, less than 20% of your workloads have been moved to the cloud. And that's a pretty small number, but regardless whether it's 20 or 25 or 30%, the point is that there is a lot more work to be done. And why? And if you peel the onion there and look at the journey to the cloud that you have in the middle here with migrate, modernize, innovate, and optimize, and we all call them different things, but I think from a perspective-wise, a lot of the focus, I think, and I think many of you will resonate with this, has been either to just lift and shift your workloads into the cloud or build net new cloud-native applications. And, there are many reasons why, organizations like yourself might focus on lift and shift. It is a valid first step, certainly, and it has the temptation of lower CapEx. You can move some of that into OpEx with the cloud. But then if you look at it, your TCO starts to go up, and, you don't get all the flexibility that you're looking from the cloud. So there is, that initial interest, but then you start seeing challenges later on. And certainly, I think many of you are aware of building net new cloud-native applications. We are not going to get into that as much in this section, but Cloud Pak for applications, which we are all part of, certainly helps you do both, modernize and build net new cloud-native applications. And, the other key fact here is that we believe that a big part of your applications, like more than 3/4, are traditional applications that need some sort of help to leverage the cloud. So this is kind of the broader landscape. This is why we do what we do, and this is our motivation. So now when you look about modernizing applications, a lot of times we get directly into, okay, how do we move this to the cloud and how do we modernize it or make it into microservices? But we certainly have a very pragmatic approach to modernization. I think if you look at the bottom, retain on traditional, that's not a bad solution depending on the application. Why fix something that's not broken? right? So this is also a pragmatic approach that we and our services team recommend, and we help you assess based on your application, based on your business objectives. There are various decisions to be made. And then if you look at the top, you might look at an application as part of your cloud efforts, and you might say, this app is really not serving much of a purpose. I'm just going to decommission it in the next 6 months or so. Or perhaps there's a as a service option that's available, and that's actually a better way to move forward instead of keeping one in-house. I know IBM has done several of those. We use them daily. And then, then the harder part comes in the blue when you really identify applications that, you see that have longevity, that are serving your business objectives. But then you need to figure out how much agility you need. Are you really making changes very frequently that you need the agility of the cloud, or maybe not? And so there are multiple options: rehost, replatform, refactor, re-architect. And again, we'll get into what these means because these terms can mean different things to different people. So let's just get into peel the onion there. But the key message I want to leave all of you with is there are multiple ways, certainly to get into the modernize section. We have capabilities to enable all of those paths forward, and we look holistically at your estate. So let's look into kind of the first step, not necessarily the first step, but one path, I would say, to modernize. We are calling it repackage, but what it really means is you want to take your application and move it into OpenShift container platform with no source code changes. You don't want to change your application source code, period. And for that, we actually have the traditional WebSphere application server base available on OpenShift as a container, and your app can run as is there. There are some configuration changes needed for the application, and Transformation Advisor guides you through that, and we'll get more into the details. But so the app has moved as is, and the runtime is also pretty much as is. And that is why if you look at the outcome scorecard on the right, you see most are red and orange. The main benefit of doing this would be if you have several applications already moved to OpenShift and you want consistency in operations across your one or two, or just a very finite number of traditional apps that you still have that are not on OpenShift. This way you can get consistency in operations across what you have natively developed on OpenShift and what's still left, which is not on OpenShift. So that's why the only green section is the Cloud Ops. We don't see this as a predominant use case. We see this as edge cases that where this capability will be helpful to you. Is it going to help you reduce your technical debt? No. Is it going to help you with agility? Just a little bit. Multi-cloud deployment, cost savings, cloud native, etc. So you can see the scorecard on the right, where the benefits are minimum on most aspects except the Cloud Ops. So now, well, let's move into the next approach forward, which we are calling re-platform. And really, the platform that's changing is your runtime. So this is lift and reshape to containers. And what this means is you have your traditional application running on TWAS that we refer to the runtime, and we can help you move it to a modern runtime with minimal code changes. In the sense, we will tell you exactly the code changes you need to make to get that app running on the Liberty runtime. And again, Transformation Advisor really shines here. We help you even generate the configuration for WebSphere Liberty and tell you the source code changes. And Dana will take you through how we tie into the developer tooling, etc. And you see a lot more green now on the right side, the bottom right side. You get the consistent operations across with OpenShift now that this is there, which wasn't a benefit earlier. But you start getting some of the agility benefits because Liberty is a very lightweight runtime. It's optimized for the containers, unlike the traditional WAS runtime, which isn't really optimized for containers. Multi-cloud deploy, cost savings, you again are trending in the right direction here because you have moved to a more modern runtime and you have improved your processes with DevOps. But the app is still, it's optimized for the Liberty runtime, but it's still not, 12-factor or microservices. So then the third step is what we call refactoring. And certainly the strangler pattern is a way that you would start. You would look at your monolith and say, what's the capability that I can remove and convert that into a microservice and start adding more capabilities to that section so that you can innovate on that part of your application without impacting the rest, right? So you typically start with the strangler pattern and go from there. But that, until now has been a fairly difficult task to do. You need a lot of expertise on your application. You need experts who can help you with that. So there hasn't been really a way to jumpstart that process, I would say. So what we are introducing today, Mono to Micro, AI-based capability, will look at your application and give you recommendations on how you can actually break it up into microservices. In our next section, we are going to actually show you more details on that. So this is if you have an application that you're going to need updating frequently, that is mission critical for you, and you want to make it cloud native, then this is a great option for you. And again, it's not going to do everything for you. You will need to be engaged, but the bar is a lot lower now. If the developers who have been working on this are not there, that's okay. You don't need to know your application in and out. It's going to start giving you recommendations, but you still have the control of what you want to do. So that's why we call this a semi-automated approach. And then, how we wrap all of this together, the different capabilities that we mentioned on modernization, they're all part of the Cloud Pak for applications. That's one of the key differentiators that we have. Certainly, it helps you run existing apps. It helps you build new apps. But helping you modernize existing apps is where all of this comes together. And I think many of you probably have attended other sessions. You know that the Cloud Pak for Apps is built on top of the OpenShift container platform and has the WebSphere portfolio of capabilities. We were discussing about the traditional WAS runtime, the Liberty runtime, and all these capabilities, Transformation Advisor, Mono to Micro, they're all part of Cloud Pak for applications. So just getting into a customer success that we had some time back, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts, they use a lot of IBM technology. And they were really looking for increased agility. They wanted to be able to handle more claims as the demand was increasing for their services. And they didn't know how to best kind of go from point A to point B. They were really having a lot of transaction spikes, and they wanted a platform to really enable that for them. And, it was a great partnership with Blue Cross Blue Shield and our IBM Garage experts. And again, the key here is to have an MVP and show measurable progress. The key value of an MVP is that your audience can see the value from it and feel like investing further and further. And within just 4 weeks time frame, IBM and Blue Cross Blue Shield Massachusetts were able to deliver on a minimal viable product and demonstrate value. And therefore, the engagement is ongoing. And again, I think the key part here is that, the best way is you don't want to throw everything that you have and start from scratch. And they had a key application and that was using MQ for communication with the outside world. It was using some of the capabilities and frameworks that are no longer, that have been deprecated. Some of you might be familiar with the service component architecture, and their Java code was using that. And they used Transformation Advisor. They were able to assess what needed to be done to run that Java code on Liberty. And so they were able to move those aspects over to Liberty that you see on the right side. They were also able to move the message bus over to OpenShift container platform. They infused CI/CD and DevOps, which is a big part of getting into the cloud journey, and other aspects too. And they were really successful in delivering that MVP, and the team is really excited to keep moving on this journey. So this is an example of using our key capabilities of Transformation Advisor and helping customer move forward. So hopefully this was a helpful overview to the audience. I will now actually pass the ball over to Jin. Any questions while I'm doing that? We have a good amount of time today, almost 2 hours, so please feel free to interrupt us and ask questions and certainly engage on the chat.
Yeah, and if you have a question, you may have to unmute yourself. If you're not comfortable with that or it's not working, please use the chat and we'll convey all of the questions to the folks that can answer them for you.
Thank you, Dana. And Jin, I have made you the presenter, so you should be able to go to Quick Start and share your screen.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you very much, and good morning to everybody. So first of all, I would like to introduce Dr. Maya Milkovich from research to give you a quick introduction to Monolith Micro.
Thanks, Jin. Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. And thanks, Vikram, for the overview of the Cloud Pak for apps. As you have all heard from Vikram, you have heard about the value in application refactoring to fully benefit from cloud agility and scalability. And there are still 80% of mission-critical workloads out there that are yet to be moved and modernized for cloud. These applications are complex and have evolved over dozens of years. So how can we accelerate and automate the process of understanding these applications and guide the architects in refactoring? Today, we are very excited to launch Monolith Micro early release, jointly developed by IBM Research and IBM Cloud Pak for Applications teams, which uses leading IBM Research AI technology to assist architects in properly transforming monoliths to microservices without rewriting the entire application. In turn, this saves significant manual effort in reasoning and understanding the legacy applications. I will now hand it over to Debashish Banjere, Executive Architect in Cloud Pak for Applications, and Jin and Anoop from Research to walk you through the solution, AI approach underneath the hood, and the results that we were able to achieve, and of course, link and pointers on how you can engage and try out Monolith Micro. Deb, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, buenos dias to everybody. So we are going to, just as Maya mentioned, my partner, that Monolith Micro made its debut today as an early release. It's a very exciting technology. Nobody in the market has it or anything close to it. We can proudly say that. What we do, we not only modernize the application, we actually transform the application, a monolith to microservices using IBM's machine learning and deep learning technologies, which Dr. Jia will go through it in more detail, and Dr. Kalia. So the problem that we all know about application transformation, a lot of us have tried to refactor monoliths to microservices, because if we do that, it gives us a very high ROI. The program will live for quite some time. We all have prized monoliths. From my experience, customers have a kind of a love and hate relationship. They love those monoliths, which are running for 10, 15, 20 years. providing them a good ROI, but when it comes to maintenance, when it comes to bug fixes or some enhancements, none of us like them that much because nobody knows the full code or architecture even. Programmers have left who originally developed the application. You touch one place, it falls apart in other places. Yeah, we all want them to go into the 12-factor microservice. But easy to say, difficult to do. Sorry?
Okay.
It requires typically it requires a very high skill level and knowledge of the existing code. As I mentioned, yeah, the programmers may have retired or have left the company. So you kind of grope in darkness sometimes while maintaining the code or even trying to refactor. Yeah, there are many methodologies. Yeah, almost every week a new book or blog is coming out. Like typical examples are domain analysis, bounded context, very informal hand-waving approaches. There is no formalization. What is domain to me or to you, I may not agree to that. That as a result, what happens sometimes, in fact, I have seen quite a few customers who started their journey of manually refactoring a complex monolith to microservices. After 6 months or 9 months, sometimes they abandon the effort. The original application was a complex. They made it even more complex by making it not microservices, but actually distributed monoliths, I would say. Any distributed system is difficult to understand, more difficult to maintain, and very difficult to debug. So what happens if your complex application, if you make it just distributed without following a formal process that we are trying to do, you do not get any benefit. Maybe you may have to abandon the project or rethink again or restart again. So essentially, and also most of these activities that is being touted or being followed in real life, they are not refactoring, they are re-architecture and re-implementation. So what is the opportunity here to get a huge ROI? As I mentioned, there are no simple economical approaches available in the market, and lot of us wants to refactor our prized monoliths. An answer to that is mono to micro. What we use, we try to do automatic refactoring to microservices using artificial intelligence. I would say the whole scheme is based on about 50% artificial intelligence and 50% deep semantics of programming languages. These two are married, go hand in hand to take your application and in a natural way to a monolith to microservices, and we show why did we arrive at those decisions as our proof points. So what is the value? The value is you get a tremendous value over manual effort. You avoid those error-prone paths. You automate the microservice recommendations. In fact, some of our customers are trying this approach with us, partnering with us. We will not go to the details because of confidentiality agreements, but so far the results we got from our tool is fantastic. It gives us the microservice recommendations which is agreed to by all of us, customers and ours, IBMers. In fact, another plus point of this particular approach is the detection of dead code, which is very valued by quite a few customers. I mean, as the monolith grows and gets maintained over years and years, it keeps on sometimes, or quite occasionally, you will see codes which are there, but nobody knows why they are there. Why are we building them again and again? Why are we loading them in the memory? But using this technology, which Gene will show later in his, while he goes into more detail, this technology is able to detect possibly dead codes. And in fact, one of our customers have detected about 20% of this code are possibly dead code. So when you go for a big enhancement, even if you don't go for microservice, you take this code out, retire them, throw it out, but to make your maintenance simple, unclutter your source code. And other function is that we are continuing to improve on it. You are most welcome to we are encouraging you to participate in our beta program, which is completely complimentary. Try it out and give us your feedback. I would say with that, I will pass it to Dr. Jane Jiao and Dr. Anup Kalia to take us through the more details of the process. Jane, your turn. Anup.
Thank you, Dave. And Dr. Kalia will provide some commentary about the Monolith macro application itself. So first of all, good morning. Let's have a look at under the hood. As Dave just said, the first step of the journey is to understand the application. Your priced monolith, of course, shows itself through multiple facets. So we run different types of data collection instrumentations in order to obtain these behaviors. So we look at what is a runtime behavior of the application. We look at what are the business use cases that the application is designed for. And we do a fair degree of comprehensive analysis on the code base to understand the programming patterns, the data dependencies, as well as declarative constructs particular to a language. So JEE is the primary framework we focus on today. So once all of these information are collected, we go through a process of data correlation for which we correlate, distill, and reduce this information into a consistent flow-based representation with various taggings and annotations. We also correlate business functions into these flows to be able to tell the AI what is the application behavior under one or more business contexts. So based on this information, our backend AI is able to then build a complex network representation of the various data aspects we have shown it. So by nature, as you can imagine, this is quite multifaceted and highly dimensional, which is what, for example, AI techniques such as deep learning are particularly good at. Then the AI is trained to do pattern identifications and relation minings to be able to generate these patterns. And based on these patterns, similarity scoring and clustering are applied on the representation. So this provides us the analytical capability to marry both the static and runtime data to finally generate a set of microservices partitions. And we want our AI process to be explainable, as Dave just mentioned. Any sort of recommendation only makes sense if it's explainable. So we showcase different aspects of the decision metrics, which we'll show. And finally, we also go through a process of partition refinement by examining data dependencies and also analyzing what is the existing interpartition data objects and cost dependencies. And as the outcome of that, we have two types of recommendations for you to look through. One is what we call business logics, the grouping of partition along the business as well as the structural integrity. So strangler pattern, for instance, is an example of structural integrity into self-forming partitions. That makes the most sense. And we also provide a partition recommendation called natural scene that further takes into consideration a complex object referencing and cross interactions. As supporting evidence, we also show the run graph behavior as it is to help you better understand your monolith in motion, as well as providing the data dependency graphs that help you to wrestle with object relations. So that's the overall underlying journey that AI in Monolith Micro helps you to understand your application. Without further ado, let me switch over to Monolith Micro application. All right, I have pre-signed in myself into Monolith Micro. So as an open beta customer on the Micro's open to you all, later I'll provide the link to point to you where to access. So we typically access this through our IBM ID. All right, so once you enter Monolith Micro, you'll be shown to a number of simple panels. The first step of journey is on the data collection, as I mentioned before. So we have a set of data collectors that's packaged with accompanying documentation you can access to. So for the purpose of this demo, I will not bore you with the details. I strongly encourage you to have a look at the documentations and look at our data analysis and collection capabilities. Once you are able to run the data collection to generate a set of data that we instruct you to provide, we have a Monolith application management panel for which you can upload, manipulate your data, and then kick off the backend AI processing pipeline. So for the purpose of this demo, we pre-built a day trader application, which some of you are quite familiar with, ready for demoing because the overall process does take some time. So it's not particularly amicable for online demo. And we have various status flags to tell you at what stage your application is at. All right, so the central thesis of the application is our microservice recommendations. So once your application has been processed for viewing, we generate a number of stacked out report, which I'll go into a bit shortly. More importantly, we provide you the graphical view of your application. So let's go through each in turn. So first of all, let's look at the runtime call graph, which I mentioned is part of the key input into our AI algorithm. So immediately we have some easy support functions. For example, we can remove all the clutters. One second, let me zoom in first. So we have all the common interactive you would expect out of the application. So the nodes here are classes, and the edges are observed runtime call methods into the nodes. So when you mouse over any particular node, we have the name of the class. We have the source path to the class definition. We also have the number of business use cases the application is being used for. So for instance, for this one, trade app servlet, it's being used across most of the use cases. And that's, I believe, log, which again, everybody uses logging, especially for day trader. So all these information are readily available. And furthermore, you can look at on each edge what is the method and the total volume invocation. And another neat feature we have, for example, let's look at this holding data bin, and you can move it around for your convenience, is we can focus on a particular node and to examine what is the neighborhood interactions oriented around the node. Yeah, another neat thing this view provides you with is, as Dave mentioned before, immediately tell you what classes do not have runtime invocation. So there can be many reasons for that, one of which is stat code. So in the case of day trader, they had many classes, called the pin classes, that are essentially for testing purpose. That's why they are not part of the actual operation behavior. Also, day trader, because being a reference demonstration application, employs multiple different type of Java frameworks and technologies, and not all of which are enabled. So toggle through configuration. That's also why you'll be able to see for a particular operation what are involved, what are not. So immediately, just by doing these sort of instrumentations, it gives you a pretty good understanding about the real estate, your real estate. Yeah, based on this data input, the first recommendation we'll look at is the business logic partition. So this is our AI-provided partitioning of the day trader application based on the business use cases. And here on the legend, we have the different partitions. So there are, roughly speaking, there are 3 decision factors that come into play for the AI to recommend these partitions. Number 1 is the AI look at business purity of the recommended partition, meaning that ideally you want each microservice, which a partition is meant to go into, to be as pure in terms of business functions as possible. So that way you can have a service that's self-contained, standalone, deployable, and reusable. The second inspiration for the AI is to look at, kind of like triangular pattern, but look at more specifically on the structure, modularity, or integrity of the application. So generally speaking, that means we want to minimize the context surface of any partition from one to another. And finally, we look at the call volume, i.e., what is the degree of communication that's being changed across partitions. So without further ado, for instance, in this view, we give you a lot more capability. For instance, you can look at in the partition microservice level how they interact. So the nodes will tell you exactly number of methods and invocation block. We can also look at how each particular one invokes, for instance. So I just expanded trade process logic, which is probably one of the biggest processing in DayTrader. Then we can actually see how the classes within DayTrader interacts with each other, as well as with other partitions. So as you can notice, we have different form of doing different sort of navigations. So we can move the node either as an entire partition or as a single node. And once you click on Save View, everything's saved for you. So you'll be able to go back to the same place where you worked last time. And we can also further hide away additional partitions. For example, I can take out all the unknowns because they are part of the pin code we don't care about. We can take out DB create and update because that's just for initial bootstrapping and database access, which leaves us with the core processing partitions and classes of DayTrader. So in this way, you can focus on particular nodes, drill down on how it interacts with each other. For example, if we look at how trade SLS being, which some of you probably know, this is a very key class of the partition. We can look at how that particular interaction works. Now, let me pause here for a second and pass over to Dr. Kalia to tell you some interesting observations our AI made about DayTrader.
Thank you, Dr. Xia. So what we observed that on the left-hand side, as you can see, we have primarily captured like 6 partitions, right? As you can see, there is a trade processor logic, there is a DB create and update, followed by trade messaging, and followed by trade utility. So based on how we apply the AI, our AI actually able to understand underlying business process within the application, within a business application, and based on that, it is able to detect different groupings accordingly. For example, you can understand that in a DayTrader, the very first step that we have to take is do all the table creation and update. So as such, we clearly figure out database create as a very separate group compared to the core business functionality like trade processor and logic. So you can see here when we go to the database group, we have key classes like trade direct, trade build DB, and few other classes that kind of take participation while populating the database. So you can see that how we separate them out. Similarly, there is another group named trade messaging that occurs in parallel with the core business process. So for the trade messaging, we have very separate classes, and they are primarily to update the market summary. As you can see here, we kind of identify them as a MDB stats, vStreamer 3 MDB, and they're all connected to market summary WebSocket, which kind of every time you do a buy or sell of the stock, it kind of updates the whole overall market summary. So this is a kind of parallel process that undergoes. Then the next thing comes the trade processor logic. This is the core component of the day trader logic. So most of the people here, if they have played with the day trader application, you know the core classes like trade action and trade SLS beam. They are the core classes that invokes the entire business functionality, including everything like trade buy, trade sell, and many other things like account related information and so on. So now you can see that we have trade action, trade SLS beam, and also they're connected to most of the entities of persistent classes. For example, code data beam, account data beam, account profile data beam, and yeah. So so this is how our AI algorithm actually works, and we have, as Dr. Xiao mentioned, we have the next step of recommendation. Dr. Xiao would like to would you like to give information like how we derive natural seam?
All right, thank you. So as Anoop showed, in this way, we're able to not only show you how the petition is done, but actually explain you in intimate details, and we will give you some additional report support as well shortly, that helps you to wrestle with what your microservices could be and should look like in the post-refactor world, that help you ascertain and gauge the complexity of the transformation as well as the operational benefit or lack of benefit you may gain from your monolith. So in some of the customer scenarios, as Dave mentioned, we were able to, within the span just a few days, going through millions of lines of Java code, thousands of Java classes, and to come up with tens of microservice petitions that made sense to our customers. So that's tremendously, tremendously powerful. All right, so another thing we do, as Anoop just mentioned, is we further augment the recommendation to provide you a natural seam petition. So natural seam, as I mentioned before, is we try to constrain the data dependency, i.e., we're looking at petitions that generally do not exchange or cross-referencing the same data objects across the petitions, right? We all know that that is difficult because that's where you end up have your object synchronization, distributed concurrency situations. You have to wrestle with your data synchronization and distribute your transactions and so on and so forth. So we try to using data dependency information to reduce the amount of risks. That also means reduce the amount of object dependencies you will create across the API. Of course, as a result of these constraints, some applications may be more amicable for this sort of data dependency related transformation, meaning less risk of operational issues. Daytrader, for instance, is pretty okay with that. And clearly, there are applications because the Java framework they have or the particular architecture design prohibits this sort of data dependency. So be able to understand both the natural seam view as well as the business logic view helps you, the developer, to figure out what's the best path forward for your application refactoring and how much of a complexity and risk you want to take on day one to refactor your application. Because as we all know, application refactoring and modernization is an ongoing journey. And Mono to Micro help to support you, get you jump start on your journey, and support you every step of the way. Now, let me switch over to the report that I just mentioned before. I'll just use our quick, we just use our quick bar to access. Okay, so we have two type of reports that's provided. So first of all, we have a table-based format for the petitions. So right now, we have the business logic petition. Down in the future, shortly, we're also going to adding the support for any sort of petitions you want, including your own modified petition. So here, we basically tell you essentially what are the classes involved in each petition recommendation and what are the business use cases they participate in. So clearly, as Anoop just mentioned before, in the ping partitions, our AI was able to automatically group all the ping-related utilities together. Now, if we look at trade messaging, it was able to figure out, even though it cuts across multiple use cases, figure out these are actually parallel process that's happening mostly for messaging purposes. And similarly, if we look at trade processing processor, where are you? Trade processor, there we go. It would give all of these use case recommendations, which you as the client can look at better understand your application. Now, the second sort of report we generate is a detailed spec out report of, for each of these partitions, what does the code base look like? What does need to be done on the interface wrapping and API side? So we basically, again, shows you all the classes in this partition. We also spell out what are the external facing classes, i.e. these classes that need to be turned into interfaces and the methods that's invoked by other partitions. We look at what are the non-primitive objects that are being exchanged across these interfaces, because most of which need to be marshaled or dealt with. And we also look at what the partition invokes to other partitions outside the classes, including the method that does so. And finally, we also have all the object references this partition holds outside the partition. So again, this gives you, developer, a full rundown of what you need to rewrite or what you need to assess to be able to understand the transformation. Mono2Micro, later in this year, will also provide you facilities for largely automated code generation for dealing with object persistence as well as transformations and dealing with these API writing automatically. All right, so finally, let me switch over to the deck and show you where you can go to access Mono2Micro. So our webpage is now live. So you just need to go ibm.biz/Mono2Micro to do the registration, access the panel. And we highly encourage you to try this on your Christ Monolith, because the benefit we have seen internally and we have seen together with our clients are tremendous. And we welcome any feedbacks and enhancement and looking forward to work with you. And thank you very much. On this note, I hand over the presenter to John. All right, John, now you have the presenter.
Okay, is everybody? Hello, is everybody able to hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you, John.
Okay, so I'm just presenting here, but I wanted to just leave some time for any questions from the previous session first, and I'm ready to jump into the next section after that.
Thanks, John. So yeah, if you have a question, feel free to unmute yourself and ask, and our panelists will respond directly.
Okay. Oh, there's a question there in the chat.
Yes. The question is, how much time is needed for data collection?
The answer is, it depends, but if you have an automated test harness for your monolith, then probably I would say anywhere between quarter of a day to maybe about 3/4 to 1, maybe a day at most. But if you do not have automated test harness, if you are for a big monolith, if you have to run individual test cases manually, then maybe maximum 2 to 3 days. I would say 1 to 3 days.
We do not recommend to run it in production. So if you have QA or test environment, that's perfect for this.
But we are confident you can run it in production, but but yes, definitely you should run in a pre-prod representative environment, as Jean said, and then maybe about quarter of a day to 3 days, depending on whether you have existing nicely written test cases or you have to do it one by one manually. And for small monoliths, a day at most.
Right. And our data collector documentation provides examples and detailed installation and run instructions for you. So we have many different methods for you to do the data collection.
There's another question around RPG support.
No, just that's a tough question. No, right now as I said, that it is not only artificial intelligence but deep semantics of programming languages. Right now we are focusing only on Java, in particular JEE, of course. So no RPG, no COBOL.
There is another question around performance impact to data collection that was sent to me.
Okay, good question. As Jean mentioned, that we expect or we strongly suggest you to run it in a pre-prod environment. But from our rough experience, I would say 5 to 10% performance impact if you run with the instrumented code, which is instrumented code is nothing but some trace statements. System out println or system error println of all function entry and function exit. So maybe 5 to 10% degradation of performance, but I don't think you care that much if you run that in a pre-prod environment.
So there was a question around where to find the beta. I believe Bikram provided the information.
IBM.b/mono2micro. There you have to register yourself giving the IBM ID, and once you register yourself, you will get our data collector tools, which you can download to your workstation. On your on-prem, we do not need any source code. This is all done on-prem on your site, and the documentation is also there. And please feel free. I mean, we encourage to get your comments.
So Deb, there's also a question if the data has to be uploaded to IBM Cloud. I mean, I think there's a process, so let's just elaborate on that as well.
That is actually, it is all written in the document, but let me tell you, that's a good question. I'm repeating, we do not need your source code at all. What we need is essentially the runtime traces, where there is no confidential information. I had a discussion with the customer before that we do not print out the value of any variable. It is just the function entry and function exits, which is even less data that you send to a normal IBM PMR in case of any problem. So those, essentially that and a couple of JSON tables, which does some static code analysis dependency. You can take a look at it. It is nothing but class names and nothing else. Those things we have to zip it up and upload it in your Monolith Micro beta tool, so that our AI engine, which we are not delivering to the for beta, we are not delivering to your site. It will analyze the code, and as Jean showed you before, after some time, maybe 2 to 3 days at most, depending on the load, how many beta customers are hitting us, you will get it in the GUI. That as what Jean showed, how to analyze your microservices on who calls what is the two recommendation, business logic seam and natural seam with all their details, and those two reports, cardinal report and Oriole report in HTML form, you will get everything once the analysis is complete. The whole process is automatic. Sometimes there will be maybe a day of delay because we need to validate your uploaded file against virus scan, do antivirus scan and other stuff to see the validity before we feed it to our AI pipeline. Again, please take a look at the documents, which we tried to show the steps in great detail.
Devin,
Thanks,
two more questions.
Yeah, I just wanted to elaborate on that just real quick, that when we GA this offering later this year, then you will be able to have the option of doing everything on-prem. But as Deb was mentioning, that what you're sending is anyways a fraction of what you anyways share with IBM on the PMR aspect. So, and all your data is confidential anyways. And then time frame for expanding to more than Java apps, we have already started receiving a lot of requests. I think I saw I mentioned here earlier, there's also interest in .NET. We have prioritized Java right now. Once we kind of deliver GA this offering and are, we feel we have covered all the aspects of Java, then we'll certainly broaden, but that's not in the 2020 time frame for sure.
There is a question around Java 6 support. So
Java what?
Java 6. Java version.
Yeah, anything will work. Yeah. No issues.
And another question: if the analyzer knows and understands data coming from SQL call or ORM, such as Hibernate.
We analyze or instrument the source code, and if the source code gets called from or it invokes Hibernate, sure, it will invoke. It doesn't matter to us. You know what? I would say another point I would like to mention here to the audience in this context, that yes, we encourage you definitely go to the beta now, download the tool and start using it and provide the feedback. But there is another option. If you want to partner with us as a partner customer, then to jointly partner with us to make Monolith Micro the only tool in the market that will be there for quite some time, then yeah, we will work more directly with you and directly with you in transforming your program to Monolith. For details, you can contact us. But yeah, please go to the beta and try it out and see whether it works. We are sure it will work almost in all cases. If not, write a support in that beta website and we'll take care of it.
Any more questions, anyone? Sounds like no more at this moment, so we'll continue with our next section.
Thanks.
I'll be muting everyone again. And if you want to ask a question during presentation or demo, feel free to use the chat function. Otherwise, we'll still have another time for Q&A. John, take it away.
Okay, thank you, YK. So that was, so I'm going to talk a little bit about Transformation Advisor. Just to bring it back, you know, to what Vikram was setting the stage here earlier, and we have, you know, the certain percentage of applications that we want to have in this modernize and migrate bucket. And there are various different ways in which that might break down. And, you know, we've seen the ones that might be applicable to refactoring there with mono to micro. I'm going to talk a little bit more in detail about the ones that we want to rehost and replatform, and talk about domains other than Java as well as part of that. Okay, so Transformation Advisor has been doing Java for quite a while, and we're able to analyze various different application servers such as WebSphere, WebLogic, JBoss, and Tomcat, and advise on how to containerize all those application servers. What we're now able to do as well is also do IBM NQ. That was something we added this time last year, and just recently we've added IIB to that list. So that's the IBM Integration Bus, the latest incarnation of it being App Connect Enterprise, also known as ACE. So I'll show you some of our new capabilities in relation to that. Another thing we'd like to highlight here is, as our part of our continued effort to expand Transformation Advisor to different types of middleware, we have created an SDK for Transformation Advisor that allows plugins to be developed that have the same workflow and user experience as what you've seen for the Java and MQ to date. And the IIB App Connect Enterprise one is the first plugin that has adopted that SDK to add this new capability that I will get to. Okay, so just to give an overview of what Transformation Advisor does. So the first capability is about assessing what it will take to adopt runtimes that are running in containers. And we have Liberty, WebSphere, Base, ACE, and MQ are all targets that we can do an assessment against. And we give you the complexity assessment, so that's the simple, moderate, or complex to adopt that that runtime target. That's based on a whole list of issues that we scan for, and we can look for them and identify what the priority is to fix them, and we can give some estimates of what it will cost to do that. So underneath that are detailed reports about what all those issues are, what detailed information about what the code is using, what libraries, etc. And we also get dependency information between WebSphere and MQ, for example. So all that then feeds into having a kind of a holistic view of what are related components that will be relevant to your modernization journey. We do shared libraries and middleware relationships that I just mentioned. And we have the idea of business applications that can group these different components of your applications together to have a rolled up view of all the issues and resolution costs that would be required to adopt the targets that you pick. Sorry, And then last but not least, we give you some migration plans and deployment artifacts. And then I'll talk a little bit more about this later, what we do for the Java runtimes in this space. And it's our intention to expand the other capabilities as well to include this as well. So we get deployment files that will run your runtimes on a containerized OpenShift platform, and we talk a little bit about how that plays into some other capabilities with Accelerator for Teams. Okay, so how you get Transformation Advisor. It's available as part of both the Cloud Pak for applications and as part of Q2 will be also part of Cloud Pak for integration. So you'll get full support for TA through both those if you have entitlements to those. If you don't yet have the Cloud Paks, you can get a trial version of TA, which we know as TA local. The URL for that is ibm.biz/cloud-TA, and that doesn't require you to have deployed OpenShift yet. You can just run it locally on your desktop. Okay, so just to review how TA itself works, once you have it installed, you get a welcome screen. The first task is generally to get some data into TA. So we have this concept of a data collector for the Java workloads. For IIB, it's a little different. The data collector is part of ACE itself, but you can still upload the results of that into TA. So once you have the data collected by whatever means, you can, even if it will automatically upload the data if it has connectivity back to TA, and if it hasn't, you can just upload it through the UI here, where you upload the zip using this upload dialog. So once you have the data in, then you get to see the analysis here. And this is where we see where we collected the information from, what we found, and the summary of all the issues that we found for that application against the various containerized targets that might be of interest to you for modernizing. Okay, I'll pause quickly just to check if there's any questions in the chat.
There's a question around if TA understand mainframe interfaces.
Not sure exactly what you mean by mainframe interfaces, but I guess MQ would be one common means of interacting with the mainframe. So we do have some. I can talk a bit about the MQ capability and how that can interact with the mainframe. We do have some other plugins that we are working on that can talk to different aspects of interacting with other mainframe interfaces. Okay, I'll move on, and we can maybe come back to that question a little bit as well. So what does the analysis of the workloads look like that we gathered from on-prem? Okay, so for Java EE, this is one from WebSphere. So you can see up here the source environment identifies it as being WebSphere, and we can see the profile, etc., and we can see the enterprise applications in the list, and they've been given an assessment for the issues that we found in those ears, against the Liberty runtimes that are available. So Tomcat is something similar. We see the same the applications there. WebLogic, you can just see that you know, the deployment profiles are different. It's a domain in JBoss, for example. But all these have the same kind of assessment user experience. So once you've run the data collector, you see all the applications and you see the assessment for containerizing those applications into OpenShift with whatever runtime you'd like to select. And then I'll talk a little bit more about the choices of runtimes and the implications of that. Here is an MQ assessment, and you can see in this example that the thing that we're assessing is a queue manager. So there's 2 queue managers listed here in the table. One of them is been rated as simple and one is complex to containerize. There can be multiple queue managers within an MQ installation that we've run a scan on for a particular host. Then ACE is similar. We can scan a whole integration node, and we can find various integration servers, also known as execution groups in IIB, and you can see each of these servers has been assessed, and the flows within them have been examined to look for issues that would need to be looked at during containerizing. Okay, so talk a little bit about what we do with how the assessment works. So we have the idea of complexity and the simple, moderate, complex ratings here. So there are kind of 2 main categories of changes that are required when you're containerizing. One is changes to the code, and the other is changes to the configuration. So a simple app will have generally no code changes that are required to the app, or let's say the workflow, and any admin changes would be limited to you know, just simple substituting of new values into pointed at the right thing. Moderate is when there are some changes to the workload required. So there's either code changes required, or you must change what you're deploying, such as a flow, to make it compatible with the new runtime. And then complex changes are when is code changes that require you to think about the architecture of the application and, you know, push you into re-architect mode rather than re-platform or refactor mode. And these would be things that, you know, complex configuration changes that might be required for HA or security concerns, for example, are incompatible technologies. You know, let's say trying to run .NET code within your workflow in a Linux container. That would require you to change that particular piece of code to use something else. Those are kind of complex examples. So you can see for Java, this is the mechanism we use for rating the Java applications. For queue managers, these is what we use for that, and for IIB ACE, these ratings are using these criteria. The other idea that we have is issues and severity, and this is consistent across everything. Green means we suggest you might do this as part of modernizing, but it's not a requirement. Potential means you're probably going to have to look at this during your modernization, and The red ones are things you definitely will have to do, or else it simply won't containerize. Okay. All right. The other thing then is cost estimates, and basically all the different issues that we find and the number of occurrences that we find are totaled up to give you an estimate of what it would actually take to containerize that workload. So these have been based on, for Java, for Garage, engagements that we've been involved with over the years, and refining these estimates to something that is generally applicable. Okay, so the other idea we have is dependencies. So there are two types of kind of dependencies. One is kind of internal dependencies on other code, like shared libraries in Java. We're able to identify those and evaluate those separately. So we can give you a simple, moderate, complex for the shared libraries as well as the applications that use them. And here is an example of, for each of the shared libraries, which applications do use it, as well as what we showed here. This is the application, and these are the shared libraries that do use that use that shared lib. For what we call external dependencies, then that you connect to at runtime. Here's an example for in-queue. So here's an application that uses a queue manager, and we can similarly do from the other side for the queue managers, which applications are using that queue manager based on JNDI configurations that we've observed from collecting both sides. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about business, the idea of a business application in Transformation Advisor. So this is what I've shown as part of the assessment is what we found when we did the collection analysis after running the collector. So now we're going to start thinking about what we want to do with the actual application, and that might be dependent on you know, what it's talking to and other factors about, you know, is this a strategic app or is it one I'm decommissioning, etc. So I can create a business app by picking the things, grouping all the different pieces that I've collected information about into one business app grouping. And that allows me to see a cumulative dev cost for all the things that I've added. And if, for example, I put in multiple applications, multiple ears into this business application, and they're all using the same shared library, then we don't double count the cost of modernizing that shared library if this is the first application that requires that to be remediated for containers. Okay, I'm going to pause again here.
It looks like we have a question in the chat that if you wanted to reconfigure only a portion of the application now, would you need to feed only that portion you're interested into the analyzer and advisor? Or can you subset the application to the scope you want?
Okay, so let me take a little stab at that one. Okay, so the more information, you can certainly just run the data collector on a portion of your estate. What we advise though is to run it in as much as your estate as you practically can, given given the your constraints in getting at the data and getting any access to run the data collector, etc. Once you have all the data in, the idea is that you can use the business application view and make decisions about which target you're actually going to do, and you might decide that you're not going to modernize some components of the business application yet. So you can leave that out of the business application for the first go around, and just take the pieces that you do want, and generate the migration artifacts for those, and that will let you build and deploy them within containers, and that will be we'll be showing that as part of the next section. So in kind of summary, there's the whole data collecting phase that can be going on in parallel with actually deciding what you're going to do with certain business applications. Do you want to add anything to that, Dana?
Sorry, nope, that was just me clearing my throat. Apologies.
No problem. Okay, so just to kind of summarize, I might just run back and summarize this quickly and then hand it over to Dana. Go back to the beginning chart. Okay, so we see the analysis. We've seen the complexity, the issues, the cost to remediate. All the reports are underneath these, where you can dig into those reports. The idea of dependencies between different components. The business application then can use the information from the dependencies to group the applications, and that provides a context for moving forward and looking to actually containerize that business application and generate the artifacts for them. You can see that we're starting to expand the number of workload offerings that can be done through this workflow, and the Transformation Advisor SDK will address adding more of these over time. So if there's something you want to build yourself that's not on the list, you can either use the SDK, which is open source yourself, or we're happy to partner with you to look at each workload and what it would take to run on the cloud. Okay. If there's any other questions, I'll be monitoring the chat. Otherwise, I'm going to hand over to Dana.
There's a question around if you need to reanalyze the application after modernization.
Yes, so we have the idea of workspaces in TA. So for all your on-premise workloads, one option is to put the analysis for all those into one workspace, and then if you've attempted to modernize that and you've gone through one round of modernization and you want to analyze again, you could put the results of that into another workspace, for example, for your round 2 modernizations.
Yeah, and part of what might be helpful at that point too is depending on what you've done, the follow-on that we're going to be talking about here, where once you've made your decisions and you make your modernization, where you can go, perhaps some of your questions will be answered as well. So thank you, John. And I'm Dana Price, and I am an architect in hybrid cloud. And so I'll continue on where John left off, where we've gotten the assessments, we've gotten some insights, and now we're going to actually take those steps and move those applications, our selected applications, to the cloud. And so, as John had mentioned, that we do generate what's called a migration plan for Java applications. And what that means is that over on the assessment panel, those three little dots, if you click on that, you'll have a choice to view a migration plan, which will include instructions, artifacts, and information that's required for you to move your application to your desired platform. So I want to talk about something new that has come available very recently. So our TA version 2.1.0 has a new option within the data collector that will allow for applications that depend on Java EE6 versions of the JPA, JAX-RS, or CDI features, that they can have an additional assessment to allow them to choose between OpenLiberty or WebSphere Liberty as their deployment image. So what you'll see here is this is a data collector from something prior to 2.1.0, and up at the top, there's a notification that's saying that some of my applications will benefit from this new data collector. And so if I click on more info, it'll tell me about the data collector that's available in our 2.1.0. And it will then, instead of showing me just deployments to Liberty, will, for the applications that depend on those or require those EE6 versions of JPA, JAX-RS, or CDI, it will give me two options that I can either deploy to OpenLiberty or WebSphere Liberty. And then the migration plan will also be reflective of using those images. You can see what this allows you to do as a decision maker is to look at what the difference would be between deploying with the WebSphere Liberty image and using the EE6, or taking the leap, moving forward to the EE7, EE8 feature sets and deploy to OpenLiberty. So you can make a choice on an application by application basis, and the differences in terms of the issues to resolve and the complexity are reflected there for you, including your dev cost estimate. So that's a new feature in 2.1.0. And we recommend that if you have cached versions of your data collector available, that you want to refresh and use the newest data collector. And that's actually a general piece of information that is true no matter the situation, but in this case, it's particularly applicable. So we do have migration plans available for our Java applications, and we have multiple target deployments. OpenLiberty, which I mentioned, and WebSphere Liberty, which you use the new data collector, you'll be able to make decisions based on any differences if you have those dependencies. And then we also have WebSphere Based, which allows you to take your first step into containerization, moving to the latest version of WebSphere in containers. And in order to see those assessments, you click up there to change your runtime selection to WebSphere Traditional, and then the assessment is available to you. So your data collector collects enough information about that application's needs that the Transformation Advisor runtime can then calculate out what would be required and generate migration plans for any of those targets. And so what's in a migration plan? As I mentioned, you click on those buttons and get it. And what it allows us to do is to, depending on which target you had, generate what is necessary for you to deploy that application into the cloud. We do have two kinds of build types. We have a source code, which is your typical I'm going to have a DevOps flow that's going to build my application, build my image, and then deploy in containers. The binary flow is one that allows you initial proof of concept. If your application was simple and did not require any code changes, you can upload that application, or you can point to its location in Maven repository so that you could then push that through a DevOps flow without doing the build of the application. In addition, we generate all of the custom to this application migration files. So if you're moving from WebSphere, your configuration is something you've been doing through WSAdmin or the admin console. And we will collect up all that configuration and transform that into the configuration for your OpenLiberty or WebSphere Liberty runtime, which is in the form of a server XML file. So we extract the configuration from your WebSphere deployment and create the configuration file that's necessary for you to deploy into Liberty. We also create a POM XML, which will allow you to build your application, build the Liberty image that contains your deployed application. You include the Docker file, which does that extraction of the Liberty image and installs your application, and then the operator, which will allow you to do Kubernetes. We also have full integration with IBM Cloud Pak for Apps Accelerator for Teams, which is a development tool, a set of actually multiple capabilities, which I will move into and talk about extensively in the next section, which is going to allow your developers to be more effective in gaining those skills. And as Vikram was talking about in the very beginning, some of the agility benefits that you have by moving to containerized deployments in the cloud also have a cost in that there are new skills that are required in order to start picking up these new DevOps and cloud development skills. The Accelerator for Teams is a bridge that allows us to accelerate that and make that an easier process. So I'll spend some time on that. In addition, I wanted to mention that I have a demo environment that I can go through of all of these, but given the time frame and also the bandwidth for working at home and through this pandemic, is I wanted to make sure we have screenshots so everyone has access to them, so we can go into and look at any aspects here. So if someone wants to stop me, I can demo in a live system any of these, and also at the end I'll be able to answer any questions in a live system. So let me walk through then what you do after you've pushed your migration bundle into Git. You now have done your assessment of your WebSphere base or your Oracle or WebLogic, JBoss, Tomcat environment, and you've decided you're going to deploy that into Liberty and containers or WebSphere base and containers. We have some tools that are very helpful here. And the two tools are, one that's been around for a while and I want to put a big highlight into, is WebSphere Application Migration Toolkit, and then Codewind, which is a developer tool I'll show you as well, and we can do some demo there. So the first thing is, any of these kind of modernization, your developers should get access to the Application Migration Toolkit. If you follow that link, you'll come to this page. It is an Eclipse plugin. It can be installed into Eclipse, WTT, RAD, all of your systems there. It executes a source code analysis for your developers and provides assistance to them with remediation. So they can move from WebSphere to Liberty, they can move from WebLogic, JBoss, Tomcat to Liberty, or they can even move WebSphere version to version. Highly recommend that you access it. And when you install it, keep an eye out for that URL, because it's very helpful in getting those, the installation of these plugins. And so I'm going to walk through this because this is one of those things that you do one time and then you always forget how to do it. And so if folks are working with development teams, I will walk through how to do this and some recommendations as we go. So as I mentioned, it's available as an Eclipse plugin. So you click on Help, Install New Software, Add, and then you'll have that URL I mentioned about saving from the website. When you do, you can select the Application Server Migration Toolkit. While you're there, you can install the Configuration Migration Tool if you wish, and you'll restart Eclipse. So that installed your plugin. I really recommend that as a part of your developer experience that you do a one-time setup of your help view, because it's something that as you're using the migration toolkit will be extremely valuable, much like Transformation Advisor's insights for your estate. This will provide the same kind of insights for this particular application and issues. So in Windows, Show View, click on Other, and you then enable the Help view. That's something you do just one time, and it is so valuable, I think it's worth its own mention. And then we're going to set up what the developer will do to get the assistance to move from their WebSphere installation to Liberty. So in Eclipse, now that you've installed that, you click on Run and Analysis. And what it'll bring up is a generic Software Analyzer page that you click on Software Analyzer and click on New to create a new configuration type. And at that point, do not click Analyze, but instead click on the Rules tab and still don't click Analyze, but click on the pull down for Rule Sets. And what we want to do is we want to choose WebSphere Application Server Migration. And then at that point, still don't click on Analyze. You're still not done. Click on this Set button, and then you want to choose your application server version that you are modernizing from. So in the case of our application, we were running on version 8.5.5. You click that, and then you will choose the version of runtime that you want to go to, which in our case will be Liberty. And then we will choose the cloud runtime, which is going to be Kubernetes. So at this point, you've done all the setup. Don't click Analyze yet. Click up there, name this, because you're probably going to reuse it time after time after time. So give it a nice name. Don't click Analyze, click Apply. And at that point, you now have on the left-hand side, you can see you've set up a configuration that's WebSphere 8.5.5 to Liberty. You've set up all your choices. At this point, we click Analyze. So it was a lot to show, but it's very important that this is one-time setup, and then it's extremely valuable. So in that case, then, I've run my analysis, and I had a workspace with a bunch of applications, and you can see in the middle there I have 4 tabs for my Software Analyzer results. Each one of them has insights into pieces and parts of file types within my application. If I click on any one of the issue types, if I click one time, you'll see up on the right-hand side, I get that help. This is the capability that I mentioned is so helpful if you configure your help view right from the start. Is that what it'll do is it'll tell you what has changed, why it was flagged. You can also click on detailed help and get all kinds of other ones. And then you can check to see if there are other occurrences of it. If instead I click on a particular instance of that rule having been detected in my environment, it will then bring up the code to exactly the line where this issue occurred. And so it provides a real quick way for you to find and resolve your issues with help. Some cases, not a large amount, but some of them have quick fixes. You know, if a method has a different return type, etc., we can help you with that. But what it allows you to do is to resolve all these issues so that your application now has changed from being applicable to running in your original WebSphere 855, and now can build and run in against Liberty. So the next thing that you need to do is to build, test, and run your modernized application, which you just did, in a container. And this is that shift left concept. So bringing more of your production environment into the developer space. And in order to do that, I have to take a really quick little side trip, because this is going to introduce the concepts that are available in Accelerator for Teams. And because there wasn't a prereq for this master class, I want to give you the very, very quick Accelerator for Teams summary. And then if you want more information, there are some other sessions that are available that go very in depth here. So a little bit of background. Cloud native is different from targeted type of deployment that we're used to on-prem, that cattle versus pets concept. So the idea is that what we have today, and the skills, as I mentioned, that are required, we have a lot of developers, architects, operators that are very skilled in just the exact development and deployment environment that is provided by on-premise runtimes. In the cloud, there's a million options. You can construct applications and want to construct them following some best practices of 12-factor apps. You have lots of different choices when it comes to the cloud, what features you're going to use, what targets you want to use, lots of different open source packages and choices in terms of what to include, what dependencies to interface with, even what DevOps tools, Helm, Kubernetes, using containers. We have lots and lots of choices, so it can be overwhelming. And when we've gone from a very governed environment to this, it kind of feels like we've gone off the rails. So the idea is that there's a whole spectrum of organizational government. What we have been used to is extremely centralized, where we have everything cookie cutter, and where you could go is very decentralized, where the developer can construct images out of pieces and parts from anywhere, build them, and maintain them in different flows. Enterprises are going to be somewhere along the spectrum. Character of your application, your culture, and your compliance requirements for your industry. So there's a need there for us to be able to govern to the right degree. An Accelerator for Teams enables that right-sized governance. So we have the concept of application stacks, which means that we construct a set of features for language-specific development, and then you don't have to construct them anymore. We've created a stack, we've closed that up, and it's defined in our organizations. There's the Java stack. This is the Java stack that does X, Y, and Z, and those become reusable. There's the concept of pipelines. So the DevOps production of those images, what kinds of tests are run, what kinds of flows and tasks are executed as we do our production deployments. And then we have our developer tools that will enable our developers to do all that quick and easy. And so let me show you how that works. The architect will customize these pre-configured application stacks. And you can see there's multiple languages. We're going to focus in on Open Liberty. And what it allows is there's a default stack, and the architects can say, you know what, we want to make sure that we're using this version of Liberty with this kind of maintenance level, with this level of security, using these kinds of logging and monitoring requirements, health checks, etc. Those get stamped out at the organization level. And then the developer just focuses on the business logic, knowing that the stack is taking care of all their dependencies. And then the developer workflow is on the desktop. That developer will initialize their environment, and it will pull in all of the information about the stacks and the images and allows the developer to develop in their IDE and run, test, and debug in containers. So that shifts left concept. And then at that point, they save their application, commit it into Git, and the pipeline aspect comes into play. So we have webhooks, which will trigger that pipeline and follow the build tasks and the deploy tasks to get us into OpenShift. So that was my real quick, extremely high-level overview of what Accelerator for Teams is. And the important part in modernization is that the same kind of process can be used in the modernization flow. So as I mentioned, we have two types of application build projects. We have a binary project or a source project. So I'll show you that binary project for that proof of concept experience. If I have a simple application, I can, from Transformation Advisor, push that application, the operator, the Docker file, the runtime server config, any of its dependencies into Git. And then the webhook gets triggered when I commit, and the pipeline deploys it. And what it allows to do is to have a proof of concept that was easy to validate that my application as it was runs in Kubernetes. And the important part is the follow-on. So our source project workflow, where we want to encourage and enable the same development experience for both our cloud native and our app modernization flows. And that'll let that on-ramp to the cloud to be a lower cost and better experience for our developers. So we end up with TA, pushing the application configuration for Open Liberty, our application stack configuration into Git, and then our developer will access the source code and pull the information out of Git into their IDE. And at that point, they can update their application using WebSphere Application Migration Toolkit, containerize their application, extend it, build it, develop it, test it. It's called inner loop development in containers. So that shift left, we're now building that application, running it very closely to how it will be executing in production, using that predefined application stack that supports my development. I then commit that into Git, that webhook triggers, and the pipeline deploys, just like it does for Cloud Native. And at that point, your application flows just like it was. It's no longer something to modernize, but it is modernized. And in order to do that, what we want to do is to enable the development. So first is we want to get Eclipse Codewind, and the link is there. You'll see it's how to install that into Eclipse. It, again, just like WAMT, it's an Eclipse plugin, any Eclipse WDT RAD. We do recommend using a current version of the Eclipse IDE of 2019-09 or later. And it allows us to do containerized project development in our IDE, including building images, debugging and testing, having rebuild with our code changes, much like we are used to with our RAD and WDT. And it maintains those standards across the dev team because they use the same application stacks and are able to make sure that what they're doing on their desktop is very close to what is going on, so that shifts left into production. And so how to do that? Much like WDT, go to the Eclipse Marketplace, search for Codewind, you'll see it, install it, and then you'll restart it. And it may ask you if your environment doesn't have it to install some Docker capabilities, but that's pretty easy. And then when you do, you'll want to show the view for Codewind. So you do Window, Show View, Other, and look for Codewind Explorer. And then on your right-hand side, you'll now have the Codewind. And at that point, you've already been working in Eclipse. All you want to do is to tell Codewind about your project. So you'll add your existing project, choose that, and then it detects, oh, this looks like a Java application because we've set that up with the configuration for it. And then we'll finish. And you'll see that at this point then, I am building that same application that I was building locally, but now I'm building it using Codewind, which lets me build it in a Docker container. And then I'm running, you'll see it's doing loopback. I'm actually running this application that I've modernized in a container right here on my desktop. When I'm ready, I commit to Git, and then I'm able to have it follow through in the pipeline. So that was a whirlwind flow. What I'd like to do is to open up to see if anyone has any questions. Looks like we have 5 minutes left in our session. I will be glad to demo any of the capabilities or answer any questions.
Thank you, Dana. I will be unmuting the participants, so if you have a question, ask.
Were there any in the chat? I wasn't able to.
There was a feedback around the WebMT UI. I've taken that feedback and pass it on to our team there.
Okay.
If you have other questions, feel free to ask them directly. The line will be unmuted, at least on our end, and or you can post to the chat. So.
Oh, yeah. It was very gentle.
Okay, if there's anything that folks would like to see, I've got my environment running both empty and a Codewind, and I have Transformation Advisor, so if there's something someone would like to see or ask questions about, I'm glad to answer them. One thing that I noticed that I hadn't mentioned in any of the slides was around our reports. As you are viewing your applications, if you have the details about an application, you click on it, and just to save time, I have this running here. The analysis explains what was detected in a summary view, and then we have this application is my favorite because it's the bad apple. And it has lots and lots of dependencies and things to be considered as you're moving into containers. But these 3 reports at the bottom, the first one talks about technology needs of the application, and it does an extensive analysis of which runtimes can support this particular application as it is. And then the other aspects are very, very interesting, which is the inventory report, which shows the breakdown of this application. And one of my favorite pieces, because this is such a bad apple for us, is the inventory report shows a relationship of all of the components of this application. So you can see this one has an enormous number of jars that are deployed. But you'll see there's a bunch of these that have numbers next to them and colors, and that indicates issues that we have found. So like the number 1 or the color red would mean this is duplicated. It's in your application more than one time. So as you are doing modernization, this is a wonderful opportunity for you to clean things up and remove redundancies. If you have unused application or jar files, get rid of those. If there are things that we have detected a dependency, you can see there's some of these that are not used, and so you can get rid of those. And then it also does a real nice, this is a huge application, a real nice summary of its construction, what kinds of pieces and parts make up this application. And then the third report is an analysis report, and that shows you all of the issues and where they were found. And very importantly, let me find a good one here. So if I have a rule that was found applicable to this application, if I show rule help, it will explain why this was an issue, what my options are for resolution, and more information. And it will also show me exactly where this issue is detected in my application. And you can see that in lots, in this case, I had 181 cases. If I look here, I can see exactly where all of these issues were found. And so as you're doing resolution, you can use the summary to get insights. You can use WAMT, WebSphere Application Migration Toolkit, to actually assist in resolving those issues. So I wanted to make sure that you see at that there's other sync sessions that are related to modernization. And as I mentioned, there's a lot in terms of details around the Cloud Pak for applications and the accelerators. So there's a master class that is immediately following this from 12 to 2 p.m. Eastern. And some examples of other labs that you can go back and see the capabilities of doing these things for yourself. So I just want to say a great big thank you for those of you who were here. And if you're listening to the recording, thank you very much for that. And if you have any questions, as Deb had mentioned earlier, we are all about receiving feedback and being able to assist you in any way we can. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dana, and thank you to the team. Do we have any last questions before we end this call, this session?
I might just give a plug for the Cloud Pak experiences as well. If you've never tried TA, you can try it online. I'm not sure if Dana has the link, but you can Google Cloud Pak experience, Cloud Pak for applications, and you'll be able to see the Transformation Advisor user experience there.
Yeah, I can add that. That's a great suggestion. I can add that at the end to the deck before we share it. Thank you.
We have questions from our participants. All right. As Dana said, we have more sessions coming up later today. At 12, there's that session around Cloud Pak for applications, which is another masterclass. And then we have the other labs that Dana referred to too. You are all invited to join. As our panelists discussed earlier, please check out the Mono to Micro 2 that's available as a tech preview. The Transformation Advisor 2 is available. There is a local option, as John mentioned. And then obviously you can also check out our Cloud Pak experience to see how actually everything works as well. All right, thank you everyone for your time. It's been great having you folks with us here today for this session. And we'll be ending the recording as well as